What's going on, guys? Welcome to this Python tutorial series number 9, and today we're going to be talking about loops in Python. So without further ado, let's start. Loops are used to iterate through a sequence or iterable, such as a string, list, tuple, range, and many more. In Python, we have two types of loops. We have for loop and while loop. Let's talk about for loop first. To be able to use for loop in Python, we use the keyword for, and then this is followed by a definite iteration. So I'm just going to put I in range 5. So 5 suggests that this is the definite length of the iterable. Now I is basically unpacking this range to be able to use inside the statement of the for loop. Now this is associated with range function. So range function actually returns a sequence of numbers based on the specified length. So the length here is 5, which means it will start from 0 because everything starts from 0 in Python. And then it is going to be followed by 1, 2, 3, and 4 until we reach the length of 5. That's why this is called a definite iteration. We are limiting, or we are specifying the length or size of the iterable that we want to iterate through. And we are going to use this unpacked variable inside this statement in order for us to have statements inside this for loop. So let's print I to prove that these numbers are going to be in the terminal. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, they have been printed in vertical fashion. Why is that? Well, every iteration is different. So here, the first iteration would be 0, as suggested by the range function. So 0 would be printed in the terminal, and 0 is now ended. So it will go to the second iteration, which would be 1, and then so on. That's why we have this for loop. Okay? Now, this is very powerful when you are dealing with large amount of data that are stored inside a list. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say we have R as the list variable, and I'm just going to throw a bunch of integers here. Say we have 1, and then 6,000. So we have 5 in length here. Now we know that they are 5 in length, but we're not going to use 5 here because what about we put another size here? So that's going to be 6 now, right? So that's going to be a problem if you have this for I in range that is not dynamically specified here. So what we're going to do is to basically use the len function in order for us to have the size of the array, even if we changes every time. Okay? So what you want to do is to just put the length of the array inside this range function. And it will produce 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if we actually add something more, it's going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because we specified the length or the size of this array. Okay? Now, how are we going to print the elements in the terminal with vertical fashion? We are going to use indexing here, just like the lesson that we've taken before. So we are going to specify the array, and then we're going to use left and right brackets, and inside of this, we're actually going to put the I as the iterable. Okay, so this is now the iteration every time we run this for loop, or we check this for loop. Okay, so let's print this, and that's going to be the elements inside of this array variable. We have 32, we have 34 here, actually 34, that's going to be 22, 22, and the last element 343, which is this as well. Okay, and you can do sorts of things with this for loop. You can find a number, you can find or the sorting algorithm that you can use here, but I'm not going to be able to talk about them here because they are more advanced. Okay, so let's talk about now the statements that you can use inside for loops. We have break statement, we have continue statement, and we have pass. Now, let's talk about pass first. Now, if you're not certain to what to do yet inside your for loop, you might want to use pass statement. Because if you run this, nothing will happen, but it will still run. Because if you actually just leave this blank and you do not do something and you print this, it will give you an indentation error. Because every time you use for loop or you create a for loop, Python expects you to have an indentation and you put a statement inside the for loop. But if you don't have a statement, it's going to throw this error. But pass statement actually solves this because this is considered as a statement and it will not do anything but just prevent you having errors. Okay? So let's proceed to the break statement. Now, if you use this, it will actually end the loop immediately. Okay? The whole loop or the whole for loop would end. Okay? So let's say I'm going to print I. So the first iteration here would be 0 because that's going to be the I, right? Or actually, I'm going to just specify the element of the 0th position. So the 0th position here is 34. So we are going to be able to have 34 in the first iteration. Okay. Now, if we put break here, what will happen? So if we print this, the only element that would be printed in the terminal would be the first element. Because if this break statement has been reached by the for loop, it's going to break the for loop immediately. The whole for loop block would come to an end. Okay? Now, this is helpful when you are having a target number that you want to know if a certain number is present inside this for loop or inside this iterable. So let me give you an example. Let's say I want to know if number 1 is present inside this list. We know that it is actually present, but what if, imagine this, you have millions of data and you don't know what numbers or what elements are there inside this list. And you just kind of guessed or you kind of just got curious if a number is inside a list. So this is very helpful. Okay, so now what you want to do is to have this length to be looped around, and we're going to iterate through this array. So we're going to know if x is equal to the array I. Okay, so this array I will be iterating through all of the elements, and it's going to check if x is equal to one of these elements. So if that is the case, we are going to set a veracity here that will be set false because we assume that the 1 is not present in the list in the first moment. Okay, or we're going to just assume for now that this is false. Okay, but if we reach this condition and this has been met, we are going to set the veracity to true because x is actually present inside this list. Now, we have else because otherwise it's not present inside this list. But there's going to be a problem here. If we print the veracity, it's going to say false even if 1 is indeed inside this or present inside this list. Why is that? Well, it's going to iterate up until the end of the element, right? So it's going to check up until the end, which is the 343, which is not equal to x. So this is not going to be met, but this will be met in the last iteration. So that veracity will still remain to false. Okay? So to be able to fix this, we're going to use break statement if veracity is now true, so that we are not going to iterate after the this condition has been met. Okay, so if you do this, that's just going to be true. So this is the boundary, and these are not our concern anymore. Okay, because we already know, or we already knew that 1 is actually present inside this list. So what we're just going to do is to break it, uh, so that we are going to print veracity after that. Okay, so let's proceed to continuous statement. So when you use continuous statement, it has a similar characteristic with break, but it actually just ends the loop in the current iteration. So it's not going to break all of the iteration, but it's just going to break in the current iteration. So let's say we're going to have array again to be checked. Now what we just want to do is to just skip the 1 now. So I just want to have a new list of these elements that 1 is not present. So let's put new list here, and this is going to be an empty list as the initialization. So we're going to know if array I is equal to x, which is 1, what we're going to do is to just continue. So if this condition has been met and this statement has seen by the for loop, it's going to break the current iteration. So in this case, we have 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be in the 4th iteration, and that's going to be 3 at this moment, and it's going to skip it. Okay? And what we're going to do is to just print the ri. Okay? And then we're actually going to append this to the new list. So append ri. So if you print the new list here, then voila, you have lists without 1 present inside the new list. So that's basically it. Okay? Let's talk about while loops. Now, a while loop executes a set of statements as long as the condition is true. Okay? So to be able to use while loop, we use the keyword while followed by the condition that is said to be true. Okay? So let's try the first example that we did in for loop, which is printing the range from 0 to 4. So to be able to do this in while loop, you're actually going to have an initialization of I variable. This is the convention. So we have I equals 0, and then we're going to specify the boundary of this while loop. So we have I is less than or equal to 4, or actually you can have this as I less than 5 if you want to just imitate the for loop. So you can do this, but I just kind of have I personally like this reading as I is equal to less than or equal to 4. Okay, so now while I is less than or equal to 4, it's going to iterate through forever. Okay, so this is now a disadvantage with while loop compared to for loop. There can be no limit in the condition of while loops. So it can lead to infinity, which is a dangerous way or dangerous thing to do in programming, because actually if you print this I with no limits or boundaries here, because this will be forever 0, right? So we have I is less than or equal to 4, which is true always. So if we print I, that's going to give us 0 forever because we specified 0 here without changing it, right? So that's going to be a problem. So I just want to clear this out to you. So if you use this and you accidentally did this, let's just print something here and it will solve the problem. Okay? So I'm just saying that this can lead to infinity. So we need to be careful with this. Okay? So to be able to prevent this and to just print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're actually going to increment this. This is now the incrementation algorithm comes in. So we have I equals I plus 1. This is the long statement, so that we are going to be able to plus this I 1 again and again until the 4 is now false. Okay? At some point, it's going to be false because we're going to just plus this I 1 every time. So we are going to have 0, 1 to 4. Okay, so if you don't want to to use this, you can actually have the short notation or short equation. So we have I plus equals 1. Okay, so you can have still 0, 1 to 4. Okay, so let's have array again. So I'm just going to throw 1 to actually a bunch of random numbers here. So to be able to print them in the while loop, you're just going to specify the length. So we're going to have I is equal to 0 still, while I is less than or equal to the len of the array. Okay, we can actually use the less than now because this is the length. Okay, so if you want to use less than or equal, we're going to minus this to 1 in order for us to have 4. Okay, so we have less than or less than len r. So now we still have incrementation here. So if you print array I as the indexing, we're gonna have these elements inside this array. So this is just like the for loop, but it's kind of have a condition that will always be true. If this condition is always true, it's going to go through forever. Okay, until we reach at some point a condition that is not met. Okay, so if you don't want to do this, you can actually just have true condition here. So this will be forever true. But to be able to break this, you're going to use break statement. Okay, so now let's have just a basic game show. So we have guess a number. All right, so let's just specify a number here. So we have guess number, which will be 50. Okay, now if guess number is equal to, we're going to specify here a reply or the answer. We're gonna have input guess a number. So actually I'm going to specify that this is an integer. And now every time that the answer is still not equal to guess number, it's going to go and print this again and again and ask the user guess a number. Okay, so while true, answer is equal to int guess a number. So it will still go and go until we reach this condition. And if this condition has been met, it's going to break the while loop. Okay, so let's practice this, or let's try this. So the guess number, it would be 50. So if you put 30, it's still going, so it will still go forever and forever until we reach 50 here. So if guess number is equal now to the answer that we specified here, it's going to end the while loop. Or actually, you can actually print congrats here if you want to congratulate the user. So let's do this again. Oops. So we have 34 and anything, and until we have 50. So we have congrats now. So this is basically how you use loops in Python. I hope you learned something from this Python tutorial series. This is the end of the series for Python, and thank you very much for supporting this, and see you guys next time.